certified EMDR therapist. An EMDR therapist, all that means is I have a specialty in working with people with trauma or some sort of traumatic experience. I'm originally from Miami, Florida. Shout out to the 305. Um, my mother and father are Haitian, from Haitian descent, and I have two brothers. I'm married with two kids, and my practice is located in Atlanta, Georgia, where I typically serve adult um, adult clients struggling with mental health disorders like in the realm of trauma, stress, anxiety, that kind of sort. Yeah.
Perfect. So take us right from the beginning. What inspired you to do this type of work and why?
Um, well, I grew up in an immigrant household. Yeah, my parents are Haitian. Just seeing trauma in multiple lens. Seeing stress, finances, not just in my house, but from a lot of people around me in my neighborhoods. And I just kind of got excited about wanting to know more about how people actually, get through trauma. So I went to college, of course, got all my education. It actually started in healthcare administration. I was an administrator from several psychiatric hospitals, but I found myself just wanting to kind of be more direct and more and wanting to work more with people and just kind of noticing and looking around and seeing people going, reading books, pushing through, going to the gym, journaling, and just kind of still kind of stuck, you know, which is how I discovered EMDR and just kind of finding a new way in processing trauma, right? And really understanding how the mind and your body just locks and stores certain experiences. It just blew my mind. It just blew my mind. So that's kind of how it started. And of course, now I'm in full private practice, serving people with all sorts of trauma, mainly high functioning people, look like me and you, right? That has a job, has a family, functions at maybe optimal level. But sometimes pulling up in your driveway, right? And you sit in that car, and you're like, "Ooh, man, still a lot going on in the background," right? That's what my typical client looks like. Those high function folks that know how to push through, know to do all the things, but still finding themselves stuck. Yeah. So that's how I got started.
I had an ex-girlfriend that would definitely keep me stuck in that driveway. Like, whew, do I open this door?
Tell you, tell you.
For those who are in that position, right?
Yeah.
They're pulling up to their home, and the home is a greater source of their trauma than their household. What are some of the obstacles you see them struggling with to get through that door and be like, okay, I think I can do this today?
Ooh, it's a good question. I think just looking at my clientele, I guess typically a lot of my clients are Black males, and just talking to my clients, just the burden of having to be strong all the time, right? Being the man of the family, that kind of thing, right? Being a strong one. I think a lot of times we get stuck in those roles of being a provider, the strong one, and we can't really find a way to break those walls down and really get in tune with what's really bugging us. A lot of the areas I think is just maybe cultural stuff, right? But just getting stuck in that I'm the man of the house, right? And of course, especially being a Black man, all of the pressures, being successful, independent, and also trying to find a way to be loving and vulnerable, which that's a whole nother topic of the struggle of Black men and being vulnerable. Yeah.
I had a friend, and one of the biggest struggles that he had, Wes, was just what you described because he wanted to be strong. He wanted to be brave. He wanted to be the provider. He's like, Terrain, I need to give whatever woman I want safety and security.
Yeah.
And then I asked him a question. I was like, how do you give yourself safety and security?
Mhm.
He was like, "Oh." I was like, "Yeah." If you can't give it to yourself, you will never be in position to give it to others. Why do you think men struggle with understanding that they have to provide it for themselves first before they can even attempt to provide it to others?
I don't even think it's intentional. I think the being strong is a protective factor, right? Or a defense to cover something else, right? For example, that same male um, could have tried to be, let's say, weak or vulnerable with his father, right? Maybe he's riding a bike and he falls down and busts his knee. It's like, damn, this thing hurt like hell, right? And he goes to his daddy. He's like, Daddy, I bust my knee. I'm crying. Wow, right? Daddy's like, shut up, boy. Be strong, right? Sometimes it's just that moment, that adverse experience that changes his whole view of now I can't be weak. I have to be strong, right? And that just shapes the whole way, his whole perspective, his whole viewpoint on how now he looks at the world. I can, being vulnerable, being weak is no longer safe. I have to be strong, right? So a lot of times I found it's just unintentional reactions, right, from experiences where maybe he tried to be weak and it just wasn't accepted. And usually it's not accepted by, um, I guess, an attachment figure like a mom or dad, someone important like that.
So it could be generational trauma being passed down.
Absolutely, yeah. Of course, I'm sure that in that example, that father most likely had similar experiences as well.
Yeah, his father was he had uncontrolled emotions,
Mm-hmm.
and although I wasn't around, and it's sometimes hard to always believe when someone says that they're being abused, because abuse unfortunately looks different to so many different people,
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah,
right? But there was a little bit of that, and then he grew up to be very aggressive and very defensive. Like if you were to question something that he did, he's ready
yeah.
to fight. And he's like 5'4", 150
Oh,
pounds, right? But in his mind, he's the Incredible Hulk. But you and I would look at him and look at him as Bruce Banner, the skinny guy, right? But to your point, it at least kept people at arm's length because he didn't ever have to be vulnerable or viewed as weak.
correct. Yeah.
Unfortunately, there's so many men who seem to struggle with being safe in their own emotions, right? So in general, how can we create safe spaces not only for our male counterparts but even for ourselves?
Yeah. Safety in self comes in all sorts of different forms, right? Even in safety in the therapeutic process, which I'm now finding that even in therapy for Black men specifically, the therapist may struggle with that Black male if that Black male does not trust the therapist, right? So from a clinical standpoint, it's really, taking a time to get to know that client, that Black male, really understanding the cultural, right? Really getting to understand how some of these protections or defenses were created, right? Um, and really, having a client feel really comfortable with the process, right? But outside of therapy, just taking care of yourself. I think a lot of times people overcomplicate the whole self-care standpoint, right? It's really simple if you really look at it, right? You think about us as kids just going outside and playing, right? That's self-care, going for a walk, listening to some music, playing video games. All of those things are things you can do to take care of you. And of course, being in supportive environments where people validate your feelings, consider your feelings, and also so you can feel safe, having those types of conversations if needed. Yeah.
I look at my childhood growing up as a young black man and hip hop culture in the 90s, right? Very masculine, very sexualized, very aggressive in a lot of ways. Right. I knew that was entertainment, and I knew that was a way to maybe speak to
Survive,
certain survive.
survive.
Survive, right? You took the words out of my mouth, right?
Mhm,
But I was able to make that distinction because I chose to. Looking at some of the people who are more impressionable, some of the friends that I've lost along the way, they're still in that mentality from that subculture to the
mhm,
point where even the outfits, like I don't even, last time I spoke to any of them when we were friends, they didn't even own a
mhm,
pair of dress shoes. Where's
mhm.
my Jordans? Where's my Tims? Where's my extra, extra large pants? You remember how it was back in the
Mhm.
day, right?
Four XTs.
Four XTs, from your shoulders to your knees, right? Today we call those pajamas because we're getting older,
Yep,
right?
yep, yep.
So when I look at that, since you mentioned culture, every culture has a subculture that maybe highlights certain things that will sell well, but ultimately, as you get older, you should phase out of it or come to an understanding.
Mhm,
For black men, sometimes I hear this stereotype where there's this hypermasculinity, this need to be the alpha in the room. And if someone tests that, then you have to prove it. Either it could be physically, it could be verbally, however way,
yep,
right?
yep.
Is that still something that black men are struggling with, that hypermasculinity?
I believe black men still struggle with that for sure. And I think a great deal of it is environmental, right? I always think about my life if I did not, let's say, leave Miami, Florida, where I'm from, how would my life have been, right? If I didn't go to college or put myself around environments where it challenged me to think differently, right? It challenged me to put on a suit and a tie to do a presentation, right? So that's one part of it, right? And again, I think it falls with that idea of culturally as Black men, and all of the, of course, generational things we've gone through, it's passed down to us, right? And again, we have to be strong because being weak isn't safe or being vulnerable isn't safe. I think that once we choose to start to deal with that safety and vulnerability, we can start to change some of the narratives, which will ultimately change how we view the world and all of those other things you mentioned.
What are some of the commonalities that you're seeing impacting black men when it comes to their mental health and their mental wellness?
I think it's overcomplicating it. I think, with social media, there's so much information. And like I mentioned earlier, it's taking care of yourself does not have to be complicated. It does not have to be complicated. Sometimes it is really saying, hey, I went through something really bad and it hurts. It hurt. It might hurt like hell, right? But a lot of us can't do that because we haven't even found the source of the hurt, which came from dad that said, shut up, boy, be strong, right? And sometimes
Don't cry. I'll give you something to cry for.
I get something to cry about, right? It's just kind of one of those, ideally in therapy, you would explore those events and pinpointing things and sharing new thoughts and creating new insights on how that experience shaped how you view everything. So more of um, of course, every black man can't go to therapy. I get that, right? But maybe making connections with the past, the present, to reshape the future.
If only we took care of our mental health the same way we took care of our physical health.
Yeah,
Even on the emotional side too, right? Like
yeah.
just being you mentioned vulnerability, mentioning safety. How many of us can go to our woman or to our partner and say, "Hey, I'm having a hard day today and this is the reason why." And be
Mhm.
safe enough to not only say it but to accept feedback. Could that be something that we're struggling with as well?
Yeah, it can, and it goes deeper than that. A lot of times, we don't have the language to identify the emotion. If you can't identify the emotion, whether it's hurt, sadness, anger, loneliness. How can you express that, right? How can you put it out to someone to really articulate it and process it and get through it? So I think maybe one thing that we can do is educating ourselves on identifying emotion, right? Which will ultimately help us articulate and get to that resolve of whatever caused it.
That's tough because if we don't have the words to
Mhm.
communicate it and then we get into a relationship, I can see that being a very difficult experience.
Yeah, that's when you get the miscommunication, the frustration, the disconnect, which the loneliness and there goes the disconnect. There go the discord, right? Which again is unintentional. It's just you don't have the words to say, "Hey, you hurt me," and this hurt has nothing to do with you. It's about the relationship 5 years ago, right? So yeah.
Someone shared with me, she's married, she's been married. This is her second marriage, but this time it's been going very well. And she
Mhm.
told me some of the early struggles that they had. And one thing
Yeah.
that always made me chuckle was um, chores. And I think that's probably a big thing for,
Ooh,
for couples, right? And her thing was if the garbage is full, someone takes it out, right?
yeah.
But it would be almost full. And then you know how it is, right? You strategically place it in the garbage bin so it's not full.
Just
You
the
push it
bag.
down, you pull up the sides, right? And then she would come in and she's like, why did you take all the garbage? And one day she decided to mention it. But you know, when it hits the fan, it's not, hey, honey, it's why didn't you take out the garbage, right? And then he simply said, why didn't you ask me? Right? And
Correct.
she's like, well, I thought that you would know to take it out when it's full. So when she's telling me this story, I
Yeah.
asked her, you have that training since you're a child. That your parents taught you that if the garbage gets full is because they were to tell you this. It wasn't like you came out of the womb
Hmm.
knowing all
Yeah.
these things. I was like, unfortunately for you, you're probably looking at it as I shouldn't have to teach an adult that, but he was never taught to do that. So it goes back
Mhm.
to the communication, right? So couples, I know sometimes couples therapy gets a bad rap, right? One person always feels like, well, I'm here, I'm being blamed for everything. Let's be honest, you are the problem. But when it comes to couples now and we're trying
Yeah.
to have people at least enter in the healthiest version of themselves because no one is perfect.
Sure.
What are some of the steps that in general that you help them with when it's coming to identifying things that could be triggers, not in necessarily a
Sure.
in a negative way, but just something like the garbage bag where it's simply a miscommunication based on childhood experiences.
Yeah. I think, as far as couples for me, I firmly believe in the idea of it's not my job to read your brain, right? Um, I am not a mind reader. I tell my wife this all the time, and she hates it. And just tell me what you need, you know. In modern relationships, that looks different, right? Obviously, me and my wife, we have a monthly marital check-in, right? And we ask ourselves a series of questions like, "Hey, what did I do this month that make you appreciate me, right? Or what did you do that what did I do that you did not like? Well, how can I improve that? Tell me the things, right? What grade did you give me for this month? A C? What you mean a C? Right? And then having her tell me, hey, this is what you can do. Throw out the trash regularly, right? Wash the clothes, whatever it might be. Just having more communication, creating an environment where your spouse can communicate and feel safe in doing that, right? And you not blowing up because you said you got to see this month and seeing that the C is just temporary, right? That you got one this month, but next month you can get an A with doing these little things, right? So we do a lot of communication skills building, a lot of worksheets tied to having how to have conflicts in a relationship, what to do, what not to do, what's effective. And remember, there's a part of what works for my marriage may not work for that person, right? And just tailoring it to what fits that particular situation. Yeah.
I think that's a fantastic idea because one, you have to be pretty humble to
Mhm.
accept feedback.
That's hard.
That's hard, right?
Right.
I see some people like, nope, Trent, I am the table. I'm perfect.
Sure. Listen, I am a Virgo, and I'm learning that sometimes I can be a little OCD. But even with the hardness of that, right? I also find that that trigger in the receiving that feedback, again, that links to something else, right? And showing the couple how this experience that person dealt with is being activated presently, but it really doesn't have to do with you. It has to do with her remembering or seeing mom blow up at dad, but the trash not being thrown out, right? So maybe it's a little bit of a learned behavior. So now she blows up at her husband for not throwing out the trash because this is the way she learned how to communicate about the trash being thrown out.
As children, we're taught to speak, but we're not taught to communicate.
Yeah, for sure. Hmm.
What do you, I know we mentioned that sometimes we
Yeah,
don't have the word. What other disconnect could there be to just telling the person that we love, right? The person that we're intimate with, the person that we have children with? What is another obstacle that is just preventing or creating that disconnect between my feelings, the words used to convey it?
yeah. I think what you said, a lot of people haven't seen healthy relationships, right? And we see that divorce rates are extremely high, right? Or even the anxiety around teaching your kids how to do it, right? I know sometimes my wife, we may have a disagreement, or she may be anxious about hashing that out in front of the kids, right? And I might think differently, right? I'm like, hey, no, we're not getting a divorce. We're not yelling here. We're not, you know, hitting each other. They need to see it with us. Let's have the conversation properly, right? My daughter's gonna see me love on you, right? Even through this thing, we're gonna talk. We're gonna be done through. We're gonna have a hug. We're gonna kiss it out, and we're gonna keep going, right? So some of that battling those cultural can't have certain conversations in front of our kids, things like that, can help.
That's a big one, like being an example to the children.
Hmm.
I was speaking to someone yesterday and she was sharing her story, and I just simply asked her, I was like, everything that you're going through, would you want your children to go through that? And
Hmm.
she was like, no.
Yeah,
I was like, okay, children can be some of the greatest sources of inspiration for anyone on this planet. I'm
yeah,
like, if you
yeah.
can't find the courage to completely do it for you,
Hmm.
find it for them,
With
right?
the
Because you
kids.
want to be that example. How important is it for you to be a healthy example of a man to your children?
Oh, it's very important to me. Just looking at my adulthood, I've been through 3 rounds of therapy just to check in with myself. That's one thing I do. Um, I work a lot, of course, but I try to have time for myself so I can, be less activated with things, right? I'm also super involved with my kids as well. I try to be at everything, right? I try to empower myself through education, right? I read books. I play with my kids. I think it's important. And my oldest, she's wants to play football. And I'm like, hey, you want to do it? Let's do it. Right. And I actually later we will go to the track, we work out together, go to the gym. So I'm showing her this is also my lifestyle too. I work out 5 in the morning, right? So I try to show them like, hey, I'm doing this thing too, right? And if you do it, you will be okay, kind of thing. So that's very important to me.
Is there still some hesitation for men in general to go to therapy?
Mhm. Yes, I think that's pretty clear. There is a hesitation because you have to now be forced with whatever the thing is, whatever that that vulnerability, whatever that's that thing that makes you uncomfortable, whatever that feeling that is that's brewing inside of you that you've been dealing with all of your time, as a kid, and figuring out, well, what is it, and dealing with the fear of what this thing may be and what can come out. I think it's very, it's still a struggle. And again, the trust in black men is extremely hard. But I think if you find the right person that you trust, therapist, right, you can get through the bigger picture. Yeah,
I know for me growing up, therapy wasn't something that was discussed, and Lord knows my family has some issues, Wes, let me tell you.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
But I think part of the reason, or maybe the biggest reason, was there's a sense of shame and guilt. Not our families going through this,
Hmm.
right? That's the people we see on TV. That's these other
Yeah.
people over there. When it comes to wanting to better ourselves from a man perspective, maybe sometimes it could be that, well, if I ask for help, are other people going to see me as less than or as
Hmm.
weak? Or
Hmm.
I'm not a man, because that's something that women do. Now, this is not what I think, but these
Hmm.
are what some people have shared even with myself. And maybe you've heard this as well.
Hmm.
What role do you think guilt and shame plays in a man's mind when it comes to approaching the need to ask others for assistance?
I think that, you know, guilt and shame goes deep, right? I think it still kind of ties to this idea of vulnerability and safety, right? In order to get through any barrier, you have to, one, say, "Hey, I need help," and the courage that it takes to break down the wall and asking for help and not being strong like you used to be is tough. It's tough for people, and a lot of times when you do decide to do it, it's maybe too late because you've held it so long, and you may react in a way that you didn't need to. So I think it's more so looking at the bigger picture and figure, how can I ask for help, what that I know I need, right? And nowadays it's accessible. It's all over the place. There's free. I even give pro bono services targeted for black men because I know how tough it is, whether it's financial, whether it's insurance, whatever it might be. But you have to still make that first step and say, "Hey, I need help." And I think that's a struggle for some black men.
When you're working with the black men, what are some of the commonalities that you see in
Mhm.
their behaviors?
Overworked, um, got to make money. I got to be strong. I can't be weak, right? These beliefs of a man has to be busy all the time, and if you ain't busy, you're not a man, right? I can't ask my wife for things. I can't talk to a lot of those ideas. I hear all of them, all of
I can't talk to my partner. I would be
them.
devastated if,
Yeah.
because I think what some people miss, at least I miss this, is that I'm not even giving my partner the opportunity to help.
Hmm. 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 Absolutely. And that also ties to, well, what did you learn this idea of I can't talk to my partner from? Something's taught you, some experience in your life created this. It's not safe to talk to your partner or a friend, and dealing with that and processing that and reshaping how you view that experience.
That for me, that was because I always thought that it was my responsibility to fix everything. The man's a
Hmm.
problem solver.
Hmm. Yeah. And now I would ask you, well, why do you think that is? Where did you learn that? Where's your first time you seen it?
Oh, that goes back to my childhood from my parents.
Exactly. What do you remember?
I remember that I had a problem, and then my father,
Hmm.
he was like, "Okay, solve it."
Sure.
It was basically as straightforward as that. It wasn't in a mean tone, right? He's like, "Okay, you have
Hmm.
an issue." He's like, "Can you solve it? Okay, let's see if you can solve it." And I
Mhm.
remember struggling
Yeah,
to solve that problem,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And then you go back and then you ask a second time, and then that's where it's dismissive the second
Mm,
time, right? And then you're
mm,
like, oh, okay, so if it's a problem I can solve, I can solve. If it's a problem I can't solve, then I just sweep it under the rug. And then, you know, my closet is full of issues back then, right? We don't open those doors, right? But
yeah,
I went through those are my teenage years, and then when I moved
yeah.
out, I realized how it was showing up everywhere. Like I would go out in public and I would see my issues everywhere, and it went from my 20s all the way to my 30s. And I'm like,
Yeah,
when all my friends were partying and drinking and getting women's numbers, this and stuff, I was like, I was surviving my 20s, and for a lot of men,
yeah.
that was probably ideally, we're told anyways, that's our best life because one, you're usually on your own. Two, you usually have a job where you're making enough to cater to whatever vice that you have.
Hmm.
And four, you're probably living your own set of rules because you may or may not be living at home. You might be in college, university, wherever. But I didn't experience true freedom from all of that until my 30s.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. So you just demonstrated what I typically see, right? You was able to trace that one thing all the way back to your dad. And that one experience shaped your whole 20s. It's a long time
It's a
to
long
hold.
time.
You hold on that for over 20 years. You're not free until 20 years later. How did that feel?
Yeah, like when I look back and noticing like that a decade of all of that, it was just
Yeah.
going through it was tough because
Yeah.
you're trying to finish school, you're trying to
Hmm.
identify the type of partner that you want if you want to have kids and get married. It's usually around that time,
Hmm.
and you want to become the person you are because 20s is still young. You're an adult, yes, but you're still young in mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so it was tough. The only grace that I have, and maybe you've seen this as well, is I've seen people who went what I went through in my 20s, I see people going through that in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. And that's tough because they've gone 20, 30, 40, 50 years.
Hmm.
And sometimes they'll say, "Hey, Terrain, I need to get this done in a year." I'm like, this is not build a booty in 90 days,
Hmm.
right? You've been
Yeah,
one way
for
more than
sure.
half your life, right? So it is hard. So that's how I would answer your question.
Yeah. And I would say, even with experience like that, therapy is not the only way you can reprocess something bad, right? Um, you live every day. You read books, you watch TV. You can have a shift in thinking through anything, right? I'm not sure you've been through therapy or anything, but it sounds like something happened in your life that changed that perspective for you. And you're just like, oh, I get it now, right? And then because of that moment, that new insight, you're able to change your behaviors to follow. So now you can talk to your partner, talk to your friends, your kids, all of that, right? So I also want to make clear that you can process things outside of therapy, right? People do all sorts of things. People take sabbaticals and people do meditation. You can process it all sorts of ways. Not therapy is not the only way to get through experiences.
In your opinion, in general, do many people go through, let me rephrase that. Do people need that moment, that aha, that rock bottom moment in general to then open their eyes to the changes that they need to make?
So in my work, specifically trauma work, using EMDR, I found that a lot of times people do need that new insight to get a shift in thinking, right? For example, someone that may have struggled with, let's say, sexual assault, right? And that sexual assault created this idea of I'm powerless or I don't have a choice. From the that experience caused this new insight of I don't have a choice, right? And a lot of time in therapy, trauma therapy, going from I am I have no choice to the new insight of I have a choice, that new understanding, that shift changes everything. And it might sound simple to maybe me or you, but when you're stuck in this negative thought of, I don't have a choice, and you finally get to a point like, oh, I do have a choice. I can say no, right? It changes everything. Yeah,
Especially for those who are people pleasing.
for sure. Yeah, 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 absolutely. Or even you going from a I'm not enough to I am enough. It might sound simple, but that's a process. And that understanding unlocks everything. It unlocks a different level of self-awareness, self-worth, confidence that you were stuck, that you didn't have or you didn't see because you're stuck in this thought of I'm not worthy, I'm not worth it.
Speaking of worthiness, the trauma that a lot of us go through, what are some of the impacts that you've seen in general that has on someone's self-worth or their self-value?
Looking at the various of traumas, a lot of it comes with showing up not yourself, right? Showing up less confident, always anxious, right? Always being in fear, always being sad, maybe, right? So all of those things are what not dealing with the trauma what kind of look like, right? Or even a high functioning person. You're going to work, you're taking care of your kids, you're doing all the things, but when you go to bed at night, you're like 1,000 miles an hour in your brain dealing with all these things, and on the inside, it's just destroying you, which translate to you not showing like yourself, right? It's having a conversation with your wife and you being spaced out, thinking about something else. So the ability to be present is very, very hard to do.
EMDR. Tell us
Yep.
what that is for those who don't know and the benefits of it.
EMDR in a very simple way is reprocessing um, traumatic events, right? And it's not just the big stuff. It's not just domestic violence, sexual assault, right? It can even be someone that was severely bullied as a kid, right? Or somebody that was embarrassed reading in front of the class, right? And that shifted your whole thinking, your whole views of the world. Is really processing bad things and reshaping how you look at those bad things. For example, that kid that's reading in front of the class and someone picks at him with saying a word wrong, now has this thought of I'm stupid, right? And now EMDR has helped them say, no, I'm not stupid. I made a mistake, right? And that shift, again, it may sound simple, but it changes a lot.
I think the idea may sound simple to other people, but there's always going to be work
Mhm.
involved, right?
For sure.
And I think the beautiful thing of it is when we simplify some of these things, it gives people hope saying that, okay, I can do this.
Exactly.
Um, because the alternative is, well, you're going to work the 14, 15, 16 hours. You're going
Mhm.
to ignore your health issues. Do you see
Yeah.
some people ignoring what their body is telling them to not take that first step when it comes to identifying or addressing their trauma?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Everybody, not everybody, but I see it. I see it all the time. But sometimes it's not that a person doesn't want to do it. Maybe they don't know. They don't know how to access the help, right? A lot of times, even in the Black community, EMDR is still very, 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 very little, right? Which is why I'm doing my best to try to get the word out in the Black community because I never knew about EMDR. Let's say 5 years ago. It's been around for a while. It's been around since 1987, but I found out about it 5 years ago, right? Um, just think of if we had access to this type of treatment, what generational curses we could have broken years ago. Because again, the traditional talk therapy, you can only go so far with that, and you still leave feeling stuck, right? But EMDR helps your mind and your body process those things you're holding on to in a different way.
Wes, let me ask you one final question before I let you
Yeah,
go today.
yeah.
I'm going to give you three wishes. You
Three
can't wish for
wishes.
more money and you can't wish to be the greatest person in the world, even though you are those things already, my friend. What are three things you wish people knew about the importance of celebrating themselves and why?
That's a great question. Three wishes. Hmm. I think for one, being your authentic self is always the best self, right? I think for two, you can't be your best self without doing the work to get there. And for three, I think that everyone needs help at some point in their lives, whether it's through therapy, whether it's a flat tire. Don't be afraid to ask for help when needed.